Alright, let's look at number 25. A substance has the following solubility: 30 gram per 100 gram water. That means 30 gram of that substance will dissolve in 100 gram of water at 20 degrees Celsius. And that same substance, 75 gram will dissolve in what? 100 gram of what? Water at 70 degrees Celsius. Now that goes to tell us that the temperature also matters. Okay, so the temperature has a way of determining how much of that substance will dissolve in water. If 150 gram of water is saturated, that is 150 gram of water contains that what? Substance that is dissolvable in water. That's what we mean by is saturated at 70 degrees Celsius and cooled to 20 degrees Celsius. Calculate the mass of crystals that deposit. Calculate the mass of crystals that deposit. Now, let's do some critical thinking here. 30 gram will dissolve in 100 gram water. Then 75 gram. Okay, sorry, I'm supposed to take note of the temperature as well because the temperature matters in lots. 30 gram will dissolve in 100 gram water at 20 degrees Celsius. 75 gram will dissolve in 100 gram water at 70 degrees Celsius. Okay? Alright. Now, 30 gram will dissolve in 100 gram water at 20 degrees Celsius. 75 gram will dissolve in 100 gram water at 70 degrees Celsius. Okay? Now, the reason why the amount that dissolve in the same amount of water, the reason why the amount that dissolve is different is because the temperature is what? Is different. Okay? So, now if 30 gram will dissolve in 100 gram of water at 20 degrees Celsius, that also goes to say that half of this will dissolve in half of this. That is 15 gram will dissolve in 50 gram of water at 20 degrees Celsius. Okay? And half of this, 37.5 gram, will dissolve in 50 gram water at 70 degrees Celsius. Okay? Law of conservation of mass. Okay? Mass is neither created nor destroyed, but transformed from one form to what? Another. Alright? So now, that is what it means. Is it not so? Now, they are now saying that if 150 gram of water is saturated at 70 degrees Celsius, okay, and then the temperature was now reduced to 20 degrees Celsius. Now they are now asking us, what is the mass of the crystals that deposit? What is the mass of the crystal that is what is formed? When we reduce the temperature from 70 degrees Celsius to what? 20 degrees Celsius, and we are looking at 150 grams of what? Water. Now how do we do this? First of all, this is for 100 grams, is it not so? And this is for 50 what? Gram, right? Now when 30 grams dissolve in 100 grams, how many do we have left? We still have some amount remaining, abi? Then when 75 grams dissolve, we still also have some amount of remaining, right? So now the question is, what is the difference between the solubility at 70 degrees Celsius and the solubility at what? 20 degrees Celsius? When we are looking at 100 grams of what? Water, what is the difference? So the difference in solubility is simply what? 75 grams minus 30 grams, which will give us 45 grams. Okay, so the difference between these two temperatures, okay, is what? 45 grams. Is that clear? For 100 grams of what? Water. Now, having said that, so let me write it here. Difference for this particular scenario in solubility is equal to 75 gram at 70 degrees Celsius. Remember, we are reducing the temperature. So what they are saying is, when I reduce the temperature from 70 degrees Celsius to 20 degrees Celsius, this mass minus what? This mass will give us what? 45 grams. That means it is 45 grams that will dissolve in what? The difference between these two temperatures. What is the difference between these two temperatures? 70 degrees minus what? 20 degrees what? 50 degrees Celsius. So, in 100 grams of water, 45 grams will dissolve at 50 degrees Celsius. Because this question that they asked us is actually calculate the mass of crystals that will dissolve in 50 degrees Celsius. Okay? Now, look at it. If 150 grams of water is saturated at 70 degrees Celsius and cooled to 20 degrees Celsius, the temperature has changed. The temperature is no longer what? 70 degrees Celsius. There is now a difference in the temperature by what? 50. Calculate the mass of crystals that what? Deposits at that 50 degrees Celsius. That's what they're asking us to do. So in order to get the mass that deposits at that 50 degrees Celsius, what do we do? Knowing fully well that it is 150 grams of water that we're looking at, and they are giving us the one for 100 grams of water, we'll first of all do the difference for 100 grams of water, we'll do the difference for 50 grams of water, okay? By the end of the day, we'll now add the two differences together to get the what? The mass that will dissolve in that what? 50 degrees Celsius. Okay, so let's continue. So now, we'll now come to this side. Look for the difference in solubility. So the difference is what? 37.5 grams minus 15 grams. Take note, this one is for 50 grams of water, which we got from here. Okay? Remember, half of this will dissolve in half of this. Half of this will dissolve in half of this. Okay? That's why we now have this. Okay? So the difference here in solubility is 22.5 grams. Now, we have gotten difference for 100 gram water, and we have gotten difference for what? 50 gram water. Now, they are asking us, what will be the difference for what? 150 gram 150 gram water. All we need to do, having gotten the difference for 100 gram water and the difference of 50 gram water, and they are asking us for 150 gram water, we simply add the what? Two differences. That is, difference in solubility at both 100 gram and 50 gram is equal to what? Their sum. Okay? So 45 gram plus 22.5 gram. This will give us 67.5 gram. Okay? So this is the mass of the crystal that will be deposited at what? 50 degrees Celsius. Because it was cooled from 70 degrees Celsius to 20 degrees Celsius. What's the difference between the two temperatures? 50. So 67.5 grams will dissolve or will be what? Deposited at a temperature of what? 50 degrees Celsius. So we have this to 150 grams at 50 degrees Celsius. Alright? Now there's actually a formula to solve this. Okay? We can use the formula directly. Now what is the formula? Let's quickly do that. So I believe we have gotten this. Okay? So just take a good look at it, understand it. Is that clear? Now let's solve this using the formula. Now what is the formula? It's very simple. Remember, the difference between this and this. So, difference in solubility. So we have 75 gram minus 30 gram, which gives us 45 gram. Okay, we have gotten that. The next thing is the difference in solubility times the mass of water, okay, that is saturated, all over the standard mass of the water. That is the standard mass in which the substance will dissolve, and that one is 100. So difference in solubility, we've gotten to be what? 45 gram times the mass of water that is saturated, 150 gram, all over the standard mass of water, that is the mass of the water that the substance will really usually dissolve in. They said is what? For every 100 gram of water, 30 gram will dissolve at 20 degrees Celsius. So 100 gram. So when we solve this will cancel this, 0 will cancel 0. Then when we solve this, at the end of the day, we arrive at what? 67.5 gram. Okay, so you can use this. Alright? So basically that first one was actually to make you understand how we arrive at what using this kind of formula to solve it. Okay, so I believe that is clear. Alright, so let's move on to the next question, number 26.